Hi, this is an interview with Nicholas Leigh, who is legal director at Rosenblatt, a city law firm. He's also a mate of mine. And we wanted to do something to help people who follow me, who read my books, who work for themselves or perhaps are going to very soon, and help them to get a kind of basic understanding of a law, of when to use a lawyer, when not to. Some of the way we're originally going to call it that how to think like a lawyer. So we're trying to give you a little bit of a taste of how Nick thinks when it comes to business and working on something and making agreements, which might be different from how most of us think. And I think this is going to be really interesting. Is that a good description, Nick?
Yeah. So because I'm a dispute resolution lawyer, which is basically a litigation lawyer, I'm dealing with commercial disputes that people have, and as a way of sort of setting up your business as well in the most effective way you can. Because at the beginning, it's very much, I always have sympathy for people that don't know any lawyers and haven't had any dealings with lawyers in the past about where do you start, and it can be very so much choice, so many things, and particularly if you're starting off your business and you want to get it going, you want to give it the best chance to succeed, it can be challenging to try and work out where you should start. So just a few points along those lines. So as John said, I work for a firm called Rosenblatt. We're in the city. We deal with a number of different areas of law, not just disputes, contractual work. We do corporate work, banking, intellectual property, quite a wide range of different things. So, the first question is, do you even need a lawyer to begin with? And ultimately, no one 100% needs a lawyer, but there are certain occasions when it's definitely worth your while. And the question is always going to be, is it commercially worthwhile to get a lawyer involved? Because as everyone knows, lawyers are or can be quite expensive. So if you are getting them involved, you need to make sure you're getting value for money. And so what lawyers can provide is navigation through a lot of challenges, a lot of business challenges, how to avoid certain pitfalls. And also, lawyers can provide good commercial advice as well. So it's really just when you're faced with a difficult scenario, getting someone involved who has expertise and who can guide you through in the best way for your business and for your situation. And although legal costs are always a factor, most lawyers will be happy to have an initial conversation with you free of charge to see if they can help you. And if they can, then great. If not, then you haven't incurred any costs at that particular point.
I didn't know that, actually. I didn't know they were willing to do a free. Yeah. I guess they're not trying to give advice in that free session. They're just sounding out whether it's a good idea for you to engage them.
Yeah, that's right. It's very off-putting if before you even know whether or not someone can help you, all of a sudden you're spending already. So, we're certainly happy to have an initial conversation with someone free of charge to see if we can help, and if we can help, what the sort of fee estimates would be. So you wouldn't be committing yourself to what could be a very expensive course of action unless it was really worthwhile.
Can I just check then? So this has got to be a question in people's minds. What's the range of rates people are going to pay? I'm not going to ask you to say how much your company charges or whatever off the cuff. Yeah. But does it go from like X hundred to 1,000 or whatever?
It can be. So city rates for a partner at a law firm that deals with complex disputes, you could be talking about £1,000 per hour plus VAT. And there's a whole range of people within law firms at different levels of seniority. So the work gets sorted out at the most efficient level. So you're going down from maybe sort of £600 to £1,000 for a partner, and then at the various different levels below that, so legal director, senior associate, associate solicitor, and then we have trainees as well who do their training contracts with us for 2 years. They're also involved. So there's a wide range of sort of hourly rates across the firm, and the aim is always to have the person at the most appropriate level doing that particular part of the job, so the client gets the most efficient and cost-effective service possible.
Yeah, so if a junior person can do it, then you'll pay a junior rate, but maybe with a little slither of time of somebody more senior who's checking their work.
Exactly. So it would always be supervised. It would always be someone of considerable experience checking to make sure it's all correct. But you can have very, very talented, very able junior solicitors do a lot of the work to create the finished product.
Cool. Okay.
So starting off, usually the two, for someone on their own who's trying to set up a business, you can either do as a sole trader, self-employed, or you can also set up a limited company. So if you're a sole trader, it's just you on your own. There's no company structure, no formalities when setting up something like Companies House. If you're entering into contracts, you're entering into them in your capacity, which means that anything that's owned by the business is owned by you, but it also makes you liable for any debts that arise. So you're personally liable if someone wanted to sue the business, because the only way they could do that is to sue you. And depending, obviously, tax can get very, very specific and people have their own arrangements, but the starting point would be that income earned from the business would be income that came to you, and so it would be considered personal income. If you going on to sort of limited company, so setting up a limited company is very cheap, very easy. It's designed to be something that, again, you don't need a lawyer to do. There's a lot of companies that will set up limited companies and then sell them to you, and then you just need to change details of shareholding and who the directors are and what the company's doing. The big difference with a limited company is that it has its own distinct legal personality. So company owns property, company receives income from the business that you trade, and if it's your company and you're the 100% shareholder and the only director, you can pay yourself a salary from that business, and there's dividends. If you do well enough and there's profits at the end of the year, then you can give yourself dividends from the profits. So and there's tax advantages as well about having our own limited company. Matters of tax at the corporate level. So corporation tax is applied to limited companies, which is a lower rate than income tax. So the money coming into the business can be dealt with in a more tax efficient way. And you can bring other people in by selling shares, selling equity in the company, or having other people become directors. There are certain formalities when you have a limited company. You have annual filings at Companies House, including accounts, but it's very, very small scale stuff, so it's not something that is too challenging.
Yeah, if you don't like paperwork, it's not fun. But I got a limited company like a lot of consultants when I was, mine's dates back to 1999. The reason why is because I was doing broadcast studio consulting, and so I was walking into live TV stations like BBC and ITN, and if you pull people out one of those things as you walk past, you're literally and so the potential for them wanting to sue me is quite high. And the advantage of having a limited company is that, as you said, basically the limit, I don't know quite how you would describe it, for limited liability, that's why it's called limited, is the asset of the company. So the company owns my laptop and a few other things, but it doesn't own my house or my car or anything like that.
Yeah.
So worst case scenario is I lose a few thousand of things I bought. The company has to be dissolved, but it won't personally bankrupt me, at least for
exactly right. So the liability is limited to the shares you invested and the property that's owned by the company. There are very, very, very rare circumstances where someone could go behind the company. And if you've also, people sometimes will personally guarantee loans to the company, which is, again, that sort of brings you more into specific corners of liability. But that's it. The limited liability, for the most part, is what you put into the business is what you're liable for, and yeah, they can't come after you for your house. So
Yeah.
I've kind of touched on it already, but if you want to have other people involved in your business, you can have people buy shares, or you can make them directors of the company. There's also partnerships, which is again, this is like if you're a sole trader, these are things you don't need any formalities to put into place. Partnerships just can form just by two or more people coming together. There are certain sort of laws that govern how partnerships formed in that way work. And more sophisticated partnerships, where you get more and more people involved, then you can have things like partnership agreements that set out how the partnership is to be regulated and who's responsible for what, and what happens if you get other people come into the partnership. Again, if you're a partner, then your income is your personal income. So again, tax issues beware of. And limited companies, you can have as many people as you like in them. You can structure them however you want to, which is one of the good things about having a company. People are aware, obviously, there's limited companies, there's PLCs as well. So whatever is best for your business is, the way you can set it up.
Yeah.
So don't be worried about being too formal. Don't worry about putting off someone if you're going to go into business with them, because if things go wrong a bit further down the line, it's much better to have things set up in a formal way where everyone's clear about what happens and who owns what. It's a bit like having a prenup in a marriage. No one wants to bring it up because it's not the most exciting thing to say when you're about to set off on a very exciting adventure with someone in business. But if the marriage goes south and you need some kind of way of regulating what happens, then it's the same with having a formal business structure, and it's the same with having contracts with people. It's just ultimately a way to set down the rules of your relationship so everyone's clear about what happens in certain scenarios.
It's really important, because you always think when you get together with a buddy, and I know a lot of people who are my client base, who sort of start something with a friend, and you don't want to be weird and say, well, let's write down what the agreement is, and let's write down how we exit, like if one of us wants to leave and stuff like that, because that gets really sticky if that's not written out. And you've set me up, and you both put money in, and you've both done training. How on earth do you decide how you exit and who owes who what money? So, and you always think you're not going to need it, but then when you do, and I've been in this situation, it gets nasty very, very quickly. And unfortunately, people, even if you think you're being utterly reasonable, as of course I always am, the other person might not see it that way. And I think that the other thing to bear in mind is that everything changes when there's money involved. So if the company doesn't work and if it doesn't take off, nobody cares. But once you start making real money, then there's a lot at stake, because you start off this little thing and you go at it and you make it successful. And suddenly there's large sums of cash at stake. Then things get really gritty, and then it is worth people bringing in a lawyer. And so, yeah.
Well, absolutely. And, if you were friends or if you were family members at the beginning, and that's how you got involved together, the relationship can be damaged or even destroyed by a falling out in the business, because a problem arose and one person said, well, this is what should happen. The other person said, no, this is what should happen. And there was no clarity about what was actually correct. And there was sort of no established rules to say, well, this is your responsibility and this is not my responsibility. So it's all those things. They help you if you hit trouble, and it can be the thing that would save the friendship or the relationship ultimately, because exactly as you say, once the money starts to get serious, then people can change.
Yeah. Nobody wants to sue a broke person. Only an idiot wants to sue a broke person.
Well, exactly right.
Most people don't want to sue a broke person, but suddenly it changes when you got money.
Absolutely right. So this brings us into whether or not you actually need contracts. A contract is basically agreed rules between two commercial people to decide what happens, how the relationship is dealt with, what happens if things go wrong, and how you deal with those sort of things. And the more a contract covers, the more rules are set, the more you've got a document that you can look at if a bit further down the line things don't go right. But as always, people are very rightly concerned that if they're going to get a lawyer to draw up a contract, it's going to be very expensive and very time consuming. So that should always be, that you should always be taken into account whether or not it's worthwhile to have that contract. And again, it depends on sort of what level of business you're at. When you've got simple arrangements with people, sometimes just an email will suffice to show what has been agreed between the two people. So, one person writes, these are the terms, the other person writes back and says, fine. If further down the line you had a problem with them, a legal dispute with them, that email exchange would show what the parties had discussed and agreed, and you could rely on that to show the agreement further down the line.
That's a really good point. When all you've done is had conversations and nothing's written down and nothing, just even sending an email and saying, so this is what we're agreeing, right? Just reply and say that this is what we're both thinking, both agree to. And then if they reply and go, yes, this is what I'm agreeing to, basically, then that counts for something if you ever went to court.
That's right, because that would be proof of what the parties agreed at the time, and that could be the thing that makes or breaks your claim or your defence to a claim if someone were going to sue you. And if they wrote back and said, no, this is not what agreed, this is not what I agreed, this is what I thought we'd agreed, then that's a really good way of just working out between the two of you what you thought you'd agreed, because people can have these conversations and one could go one way, one could go the other way, and they've got slightly different recollections of what they actually agreed. And if it's a fairly straightforward transaction, even then you can have these little discrepancies get into it. But anything that you can look to and say, well, actually, this is what we agreed at the time, is always going to be very useful. Even if you don't have a contract, certain laws apply to bring in contractual requirements or legal requirements in the absence of contracts. So there are certain implied terms into a contract that are based in law, including that goods are to be of a satisfactory quality or services are to be provided to a reasonable level of care and skill. And there's also older common law provisions, including in respect of negligence. So if the level of care you're supposed to be providing falls below a certain level and someone suffers loss as a result of that, they might be able to put together a claim based on that. So even if you don't have a contract, there are still certain laws and certain parts of the legal system that still you could turn to if you needed to. For a lot of businesses, but for startup businesses, having terms and conditions is also a very, very good thing. So terms and conditions basically being your pro forma contract, and so you don't need to negotiate them each time for a brand new client. And they would include the key essential terms, such as payment, delivery, and if you had any issues and you needed to get a third party involved to resolve the dispute, certain dispute resolution mechanisms. Again, that's something you could have a lawyer draft for you, but there's a lot of examples on the internet that you can find. One of the key things for every new business, and particularly if further down the line you got involved in a legal dispute, is to make sure you're organised. So that involves taking notes when you're having discussions with people, keeping a very clear record of any sort of documents, so invoices, emails. So you have a very ready store of documents if someone comes to you and says, well, hang on a minute, this has gone wrong and you owe me, or if you found yourself in a situation where the other party hadn't paid what they were supposed to pay or were trying to allege something other than had been agreed, and you want to put together a claim to go against them, again, then you've got the documents all in one place.
Yeah, and I keep notes on every call I have with people, every client call. every sales call, and I record all my Zoom calls by default.
Yes.
And I always do those on my Zoom account, so and they all end up in one folder. And that means if anybody ever says, you told me to, quit my job and now I'm broke, which I would never do anyway. But
Yeah.
if they claim, because it's worth pointing out that we're not protecting ourselves against our own incompetence necessarily. I mean, that you might cause some accident or something that somebody takes very badly, but it's probably more likely that somebody claims you've done something. If you're doing a good job, someone can still claim that you've done something bad and let them, and that's not at all the case. And I had one client who was on a group program and said that I told her her idea was absolutely useless and she would never be able to succeed, and she should therefore get her money back because the course has been terrible. And I went like, that's not what I said. And I could go back and listen. I mean, it was a pain to go back and find the right recording and listen to it and find the right bit. But what I said in the recording bore no resemblance to what she said. That allowed me, for my own mind, just go like, okay, I'm not imagining it. But also, if that actually gone to some sort of tribunal or I don't know what, or she, decide to sue me, or take me to small claims court, then I could have said, well, this is what I actually said, and it's nothing like what you actually claimed.
Absolutely, and that's exactly right. So there is the two elements to it, which is that you can put together your claim or you can defend someone else's claim against you. And the other side of it is that it's a very unpleasant thing to go through when someone is saying that you did this badly or you did this wrong or you said something and you never said it. If you can prove that you never said it, or you can prove that things were different from how they remember them or how they perceive them, then that's much better for you, for your confidence, for your confidence in your judgment. And if you're at a fairly early stage of setting up a business and you're struggling with all the things that startup or early stage businesses do, if someone is saying you're terrible or you're an awful person, then that doesn't do much for your confidence, which feeds into the overall ability to move forward. So these things that help you just give yourself peace of mind as well are very, very useful. And these are the kind of things you can build on going forward as well. So the more, if you have that happen to you and you've got a store of documents where you can prove that person wrong, then you can sleep a lot better.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. If you do get sued, I always think the first thing to do is don't take it personally, take a deep breath, and focus then on what you need to do. So again, depending on how much is at stake, basically, the question should be, do I need to get a lawyer involved in this, or is this something I can deal with myself? So the court system is structured so that various levels of value of claim are dealt with at various stages within the court system. So there's the small claims that people are aware of, the small claims courts, and that's for claims worth up to £10,000. There are subsequent layers that go up in value. Fast track is between £10,000 and £25,000. There's an intermediate track for claims worth £25,000 to £100,000, and then multi-track claims for £100,000 or more. So multi-track claims, you would definitely need to be getting a lawyer involved because they are complicated, and those are the claims that go into the millions. Depending on how complicated the matter is, fast track, intermediate track claims, you would probably still want to get a lawyer involved to some degree. Small track claims are designed so you don't need a lawyer. We are actually providing small claims training as well for companies to deal with small claims themselves, bringing them to recover money that they're not going to get back, or to defend them if someone is suing them. If you are going to get a lawyer involved, it's always best to get them involved as early as you can, and don't put it off. But that question will ultimately be, is the amount of money I'm going to spend on this lawyer or on this law firm worthwhile in the grand scheme of things? So this is when you come back to having that initial discussion with a lawyer to say, you know, can you help me? If so, how much are your fees going to be? So for someone who's never been involved in a legal dispute before, and someone's suing you for £8,000, or you want to sue someone for £8,000, you're not necessarily going to know about the different tracks, you know, the different amount of costs are involved. So you need someone you can talk to. And it could be that you have that conversation and you decide, well, actually, I don't need a lawyer. This is something I can deal with by myself. Or I absolutely do need a lawyer. And the fees they're telling me it's going to cost, it's justifiable in the grand scheme of things. So it's that's always, the key thing is always going to be how much is it going to cost? Getting a lawyer involved as well. You have a business to run. You don't necessarily want to spend the time it will take for you to run the case, deal with the case. And so there's that factor as well, that having a lawyer involved means that you can get on with running your business without having to deal with this. So everyone knows there's a degree of risk involved in litigation. You never quite know what the outcome's going to be. The unsuccessful party usually has to pay the other side's costs. Again, people are pretty familiar with that. You don't necessarily, even if you are 100% successful, you're not likely to get all of your legal costs back as well, which is something that can take people by surprise. Mm. So again, these are all factors that go into the overall question of, is it justifiable to get a lawyer involved? How much is it going to cost me? There are also forms of alternative dispute resolution, things like mediation, where you can have the dispute resolved by getting a third party involved, which can bring it to an end fairly quickly. There's also, so professional indemnity insurance is something that businesses can get when they're starting off, and you know, businesses as they go through. This is a way of protecting you if you are negligent and one of your clients comes to you and says you've been negligent. You can pay a premium for the insurance, and then that will provide cover for that sort of kind of claim.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of it personally because you know, I come under the category of a coach. I'm a business coach, and the rates are quite low, so it's a couple £100 a year, and that's because it's quite rare to get sued as a coach in England. Perhaps not if you're in America, where everyone's very litigious, but yeah, it's quite rare. So it makes it quite cheap. But
absolutely, it's definitely something that's worth looking into. Just to sort of come back to the beginning. You don't need a lawyer, but there's a lot of situations when it's worthwhile to get one involved. Key questions are always going to be, how much is it going to cost? Is that worthwhile? Like I say, we are happy to have an initial conversation. My firm is Rosenblatt. We are in the City of London. My email address, if you want it, is nick.leigh@Rosenblatt, rosenblatt.co.uk.
Been interesting for me to go through this with you, and you know, we've had a bit of a chat before, and I've learned some things about this. These are kind of questions that come up a lot of people who are very new to business. Yeah, been in business, working for themselves for a long time. So that's really useful. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate that. Thanks for Rosenblatt for lending us Nick for a bit of time.
And thanks very much, John.
All right. Anyone who wants to follow what I do, you can probably find me easiest just by Googling John Spencer Williams. I help people create a business they love, basically. And you're on LinkedIn as well, aren't you, Nick?
Yes. So you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
So that might be a good place to go and just connect with Nick. And thanks so much.
Oh, thanks very much. See you soon.